The purpose of Wealth Talk is to educate, inform, and hopefully entertain you on the subject of building your wealth. WealthBuilders recommends you should always take independent financial, tax, or legal advice before making any decisions around your finances.
Welcome to episode 107 of Wealth Talk. My name is Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director for WealthBuilders, and I'm joined today by our founder, Mr. Kevin Whelan. Hi, Kevin.
Good morning, Chris. Good to be with you today.
Yes, and today we are looking at the topic of building your reputation and finding investors through the power of social media. And we've got two guests on today.
Well, social media is such an incredibly powerful form of leverage. And we know for sure that wealth can only be built with leverage. And this is an important one to be considering. But like many forms of leverage, Chris, can be double-edged, can cut both ways. So it's important you listen to the contributions from two great people, from Ellie and from Tej, and listen to the consistency of what they say. And then we'll wrap up with some of the key points at the end. But fascinating, though, to see how people have created incredible reputations, have attracted investors, which has helped them build not just the wealth for themselves, but the wealth of their investors as well. So like all good wealth builders, we're solving problems. We're entrepreneurs at heart, always solving the problem of somebody else.
And we know Ellie well, of course. Ellie's featured previously on Wealth Talk. And you hold a Clubhouse event every week with Ellie as well, Kevin, which has been building really nicely over the last few months.
Yeah, Wealth Wednesdays. And we've really enjoyed it. Ellie's just a whiz at this. And so we work very well collaboratively. And so, yes, we're experimenting. And it is an experiment, but we're doing it every Wednesday. Call it Wealth Wednesday. So if you're on Clubhouse, tune in for that. And also you get to kind of interact and ask questions. So you don't just hear a podcast, you get a live podcast straight to your home, and you can interact with us if you want to do that. But that's me and Ellie, not you, Chris, on this one. That's because you're not an Apple user, right?
That's right. Yeah, only available.
But Androids are coming for Clubhouse, I think, and even this month, aren't they? So
should be very soon.
That's going to increase. But like all social media, you've just got to make decisions about what you want to do, why you want to do it, give some commitment of time and energy and preparation, and it should pay dividends. And certainly now, I think Ellie is very clear that she's getting positive results from Clubhouse. And, we're doing the same. And the podcast is another form of leverage too, Chris. And I think we've hit a bit of a milestone too, haven't we?
We have. We have just hit 100,000 downloads. So thank you so much for your contribution, for listening every week. And we know we're downloaded in over 100 countries now, Kevin. So it's a great honor for us. That was a really nice milestone to achieve.
Yeah, and we didn't set out to achieve 100,000 downloads or 100 countries just coincidentally. We just really decided that the journey that we're on, which is to be a guide to people, an inspiration to people to help them build their wealth. We know how difficult life is and why so few people make it. And we wanted to make a difference. So it wasn't for monetization. We didn't expect that the podcast would lead to money. It doesn't lead to money. What it does is it demonstrates our commitment, and it demonstrates our value and our values. And I think what that's doing, Chris, is building the reputation of Wealth Builders and the reputation of you and the reputation of me, one podcast at a time. And in reality, that's one of the key lessons to learn, that once you make a commitment and you show up consistently, then that's what you need to do in order to, keep true to your passion and your purpose. And so I'm pleased we're continuing to do that. And we will continue to do Wealth Wednesdays, and we'll continue to do the podcast. So let's hear what both Ellie and Tej, what their results have been and what their views are.
Yeah, so just before we head on over to our guest today, just want to remind you that we are holding a webinar on the 3rd of June, and that is to show you the launch of the brand new Wealth Builders Academy. So it's the evolution of our 7 Steps to Wealth program, where we've been helping our members move from a place of financial insecurity to security to independence. And if you'd like to have a look inside and see all of the new changes and updates that we've made to the Academy, then do register by heading on over to wealthbuilders.co.uk/Academy launch. Okay, right. So focusing on step 5 today, which is leveraging technology, leveraging relationships. And let's head on over to our conversation with Ellie Mackay and Tej Singh. Ellie, welcome back to Wealth Talk today.
Thank you for having me, Christian. Great to be here.
Yeah, so it's episode 85 back in December when we last spoke. So how's things been going since then for you?
Yeah, pretty good, to be honest. Well, we've had another lockdown, haven't we? So a lot's been changing in the world. But in terms of the business, then yeah, I can't complain at all, Christian. It's been a very good year so far.
Yeah, so I will definitely put the link to the show notes in the show notes for that episode. So anyone who wants to find out about your story and your journey to success, Ellie, they can check that out. But today we're talking specifically about how you have used social media to basically find investors and raise investment money for your projects and your business.
Yeah, brilliant. It's a subject I'm hugely passionate about, as you know, and I could talk about it all day. So you might need to keep me reined in.
Yeah, so let's start from the beginning. You know, how did you first realize that social media was an outlet really for you to be able to raise finance?
Well, my primary platform is LinkedIn. Through that platform alone, we have raised millions of pounds in terms of private investment and attracted angel investment, joint venture partners, and everything in between. But if you'd have said that to me 4 years ago, I would have had a very different outlook. For me, LinkedIn was just an online CV. But when I actually went to do some property training, which was almost 4 years ago, one of my mentors said to me on day one that you're a marketer first and everything else second. And that really resonated with me on quite a deep level, because ultimately if people don't know who you are, then they're unable to do business with you. But at that time, I had very limiting beliefs about raising finance. I had limited experience within property. Although my husband and I had started investing in 2006, we actually had a very little success, and I had quite limiting beliefs, I suppose, around the value that we could offer. But by taking action and by starting to post on a regular and consistent basis, it enabled me to start to understand the platform. I think perhaps where we have differed from other people is that we've always treated social media as a job from day one, as opposed to an inconvenience or a bolt-on to the, I say in inverted commas, the proper work. And I think when you treat social media as an opportunity rather than inconvenience, that's when the magic can really happen. Now, we hear a lot people talking about your clients or your potential avatar getting to like, know and trust you. And that happens through consistency. But just to dispel one of the common beliefs within property specifically, a lot of people believe that you need to have an established track record before you can go out and start raising those funds. And I'm just here to say otherwise, because by positioning ourselves as a preeminent authority, by sharing our own journey and by sharing our insights into the industry and just sharing from a place of authenticity, we'd actually raised hundreds of thousands of pounds in private investment before we picked up the keys to our first property. And as you know, Christian, over the last few years, we've went on to build our own multi-million pound portfolio, and we've done built wealth for hundreds of our clients as well. But certainly from the start, it was a case of going deep on the platform, mastering the platform, seeing what works as well, because people don't like to be continually educated, and really just taking it from there.
Okay. So what was the platform? What were those first steps that you took?
In the first instance, it was LinkedIn. You will get mixed opinions on this, but for me, I think it's always better to master one platform, and then, of course, you can move on to the other. Now we're quite established on Instagram and on Facebook, but we do tend to find that you have a different audience, and all the platforms are really good for different things, and there's all sorts of opportunities that come from social media. And quite quickly we realised it was about so much more than raising finance. But in terms of the discussion today, we do still find that LinkedIn is our primary platform for raising funds up until very recently. And as you know, because I collaborate with Kevin on this, but we also use a new social media audio app, which is called Clubhouse. Now that came to the UK January this year. And yeah, we found that actually that's outperforming LinkedIn in terms of raising finance as well. So just another one to chuck into the mix for the listeners.
Okay. And for anyone who's listening now, Ellie, who it kind of knows that they need to get out there, get themselves out there a bit more on social media, but they don't really know what to do. Is there a particular strategy, or is it just a matter of doing something?
I think I don't want to sound too wishy-washy about this, because there absolutely is method to the madness, but that only comes from, to perfect anything, you have to have some data. You have to have things to test and measure, and that only comes from starting. So you really do need to start now and get perfect later. Look at what's working. And when I say I went deep on the platform, I would literally immerse myself for hours, if not days, looking at what was getting engagement. Because ultimately, you can have the most informative video or article in the world, but if you're not getting eyes on it, then it's sort of falling on deaf ears, so to speak. So the first thing I would say is you need to have your shop window in order. And by your shop window, I mean your profile, your bio, your about section. That needs to be looking great. And then you need to really sort of identify what kind of content is actually getting traction, what's getting engagement. And actually, some of my best performing posts haven't been property specific. They may be about the entrepreneurial journey, or the fact that we're trying to spin plates during lockdown with a young family and multiple businesses, and the sort of content that people can really relate to. But what you might want to do then is follow that up with a call to action on your next post whilst you've got eyes on your profile. But ultimately, these posts can be getting tens, if not hundreds of thousands of views. So you're every time that you have a highly engaged post, you've got a lot of connection requests, you're gaining a lot of followers. And it's really through doing that strategy that I've built up over, I think I've got around 35,000 followers on LinkedIn. But if I was just doing a load of industry specific content, then I absolutely wouldn't have that following. And it's quite interesting as well, because if you look at my social media, or any of my social media platforms, you'll see plenty of inverted commas social proof. You'll see professional videos. You'll see me walking around just with the iPhone phone with my husband Mark. You'll see the professional videos as well as the kind of amateur ones. But actually, they don't tend to be the posts that generate the most amount of inquiries, which will go against the conventional wisdom that you tend to hear within the industry. And actually, in 2019, we generated £4 million in private investment from the platform, and that was without sharing any social proof in inverted commas. So, just to say to the listeners that there's many different ways that you can do this. And there's many influencers that have all got varying degrees of success that have found approaches that work from them. So I suppose it's about doing something that you're familiar with. People follow people that are going somewhere. And if you can get that across in your social media, whether that's through your written copy, whether that's through your videos, then, ultimately you've just got to find something that you feel comfortable with. And of course, these skills do need honed, they do need cultivated. We talk about your elevator pitch, or perfecting the art of public speaking. And when people think about public speaking, they often think about keynotes or standing in front of rooms with hundreds of people, but actually it's any form of communication, whether that's interviews like this, whether that is the video walk-rounds that I was referring to earlier. So yeah, you absolutely need to master these skills. But I think in the first instance, it's just a case of getting comfortable with a platform that feels aligned with you and your message.
Mm. And in terms of frequency, if someone's thinking now, well, do I have to literally spend every day on there? Any tips for them in terms of like how often they need to be present?
Yes, I mean, it's like anything. There's no easy solution to this. Everyone wants the magic bullet without putting in the work. And social media, as I said it before, it has to be treated like a job. And this is where I see so many people going wrong. They will go on a campaign. They will be reasonably aggressive. They may post every day or several times a day for a couple of months. They'll just be starting to gain a bit of traction. But because they've not seen any tangible results, as in money in the bank, they lose faith and they sort of back off a little bit. And then a couple of months later, they might start another campaign. Whereas I think where we've excelled is through the consistency and the compound effect of taking that daily action. So to answer your question, Christian, at the moment, I only post maybe once a day, sometimes twice a day, depending on what we've got going on or what message I have to share. But at the start, it was a lot more frequently. It was 2 or 3 times a day because I really wanted to dominate people's headspace But again, I suppose it depends on what kind of level your listeners are playing at. If you're just looking to raise funds for a single buy-to-let or an individual project, then perhaps you don't need such an aggressive strategy. But we never got into this to play small. We were always looking at raising big sums of cash and connecting with large amounts of people. So yeah, your strategy may vary depending on what you're trying to achieve.
And what does the process look like for you, Ellie, after someone has contacted you? So, the social media, I guess, is just the first step of kind of building that trust and relationship with someone. And it might take a long time, right, of someone just seeing your posts before they actually reach out. Do you have a process that follows that?
Yeah, we absolutely do. So we have a link to our web form usually when we do our calls to action. So people, they will complete that form. They then have to, which is just a basic fact find form, investor fact find form. We have a few qualifying questions. We ask for proof of funds and proof of eligibility to be able to invest in the first instance. And then from that point, we send a Calendly link and book the call. But the point you made there was very interesting, Christian, because actually what we tend to find through, we'll use LinkedIn as the example, because that's where we have raised the majority of our funds. But it can be very demoralizing, in particular when you start with social media, because it can take time to gain that following and to start gain that traction and the momentum. But quite often, by the time people reach out to me, the message usually goes something like this: Ellie, I've been following you for the last 12 months, 18 months, 24 months. Absolutely love your content. And I'm really keen to do something with you. I've got X amount of money. How do I sign up? And it's a very different kind of call to a cold website inquiry, should we say. Now, interestingly, Christian, and I really want to emphasize this point to your listeners, I always take 5 to 10 minutes at that point just to see whether that inquiry has engaged with my content over the last couple of months. And 95% of all the clients that we've onboarded through our social media platforms, they don't engage. They're not what I call my die-hard fans or followers. They're lurkers. They watch in the wings. Sometimes they're not even first-line connections. So don't get demoralized and despondent when you aren't necessarily getting the results that you want to achieve. Social media, just like property, it's not get rich quick. People ultimately want to know that their money's safe. They want to know that they can trust you. And the easiest way to sort of do that is through longevity and turning up day after day after day. And also, we mentioned different approaches and different things that work, but and the word authenticity, which does get bandied around a hell of a lot. But for us, we think it's very important to share a sort of warts and all insight into what property development actually entails. And as you well know, Christian, we get thrown grenades, and it's how you deal with those grenades. And some of our best performing posts in terms of onboarded clients have been where we've shared some of the struggles. Like not so long ago, we had an instance where I'll not go into the details, but we had to get rid of the builders mid-job, which is something that you do not do lightly in the middle of an HMO. But we shared that journey with with our audience. We shared the reasons behind it, how we came to this conclusion, why it was no longer a sustainable working relationship. But then what we did as a business to overcome that, turn that project around and actually have a really positive outcome. And we onboarded so many clients from that, people that have perhaps been on the cusp of wanting to reach out to us, and they can actually see how you resolve the problems, as well as just sharing the sort of shiny pictures of picking up a new set of keys. It's showing the real life behind the scenes insights and to what can go wrong as well as what can go right in property.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, Ellie, because, we're talking about the benefits of social media here. Have you found any downsides at all to kind of putting yourself out there? Is there anything someone should be aware of before they start this?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to be realistic. I think the style of my content is very effective because I am quite vulnerable in terms of my posts. I mentioned some of my best performing posts aren't actually property related. I'm not a wallflower in real life, and I'm not a wallflower in social media. So what you see is what you get. And like all sort of strong-minded people, that tends to divide opinion. It's like Marmite. But by being my true self online, that attracts the right kind of people to me. The downside of that, sadly, is when you do put your head above the parapet, that does open you up to abuse, to trolling, whatever you want to call it. And I think we've got to be careful as well in how we define trolls, because someone having a difference of opinion to you is definitely not my definition of a troll. We're in a democratic state and I'm always open to conversation. But yeah, when you put yourself out there, you are going to open yourself up to some criticism. And I think that one of the reasons I talk about the mindset so much in terms of my content is because it's very relevant. Without the strong mindset, you're building the foundations on sand, and that's as much for the social media side of the business as it is to the property development side of the business, because it's a hell of a roller coaster, and you need to keep mentally strong. You can have one day where you might get 10 inquiries coming in, and then you might go 2 months without receiving one single inquiry. So I think it's being mindful of that, building up that resilience, and just having that consistency.
Yeah. So anyone who's still on the fence, Ellie, listening now, if you were to just summarize the strategy, the benefits, what would you say to them?
I mean, it's transformed our business. There's no two ways about it. We've funded all of our projects through private finance that was raised through our social media, and then off the referrals and the recommendations and the compound effect of that, and the opportunities that also come off the back of that, Christian, like getting on podcasts like this, speaking at events. It's all really under the social media umbrella, because those opportunities wouldn't exist had people not known who I was in the first instance. So yeah, be consistent, be authentic, don't tell any lies if you're at the start of your journey and you do have limiting beliefs around raising finance. I can give you example after example of people with no track record that are going out there and raising funds through demonstrating their knowledge. And ultimately, people buy from people. Property investors will always do their due diligence. So if you're sending them a deal, they're going to be rigorously testing that anyway. So don't try to portray that you're something that you're not, because you will soon come unstuck. But don't wait until you've got that established track record, please, because if we'd have waited to do that, let me just give you a quick example. When we did our property training, which was nearly 4 years ago now, we actually bought 2 properties within 4 days of our property education, which I think you'll agree is pretty quick work. But the way the legal system works and various complications, we didn't pick up the keys to those properties for 5 months. But by the time we picked up those keys, we'd already raised several £100,000s of an investor finance, which enabled us to keep going and to keep that momentum going.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic, Ellie. And I really enjoyed hearing your insights today. So thank you. And I can't let you go without asking, how can people follow you on social media if they want to find out more about what you do?
Well, I get about, Christian. You will find me on Insta, on LinkedIn, on Clubhouse. I've got a YouTube channel. I've also got a podcast, the On a Mission podcast. So feel free to connect with me across all the platforms.
I will. Thank you, Ellie.
Thanks, Christian.
Tej, welcome to Wealth Talk today.
Thanks so much for having me, Christian. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and really, really pleased to have you on today. And of course, we're specifically looking at how people have used social media to raise investment today. And I know you've obviously leveraged the power of social media to good effect yourself. So why don't we begin, Tej, by, well, first of all, give our listeners a little bit of background to yourself so they know your story.
Sure. So I started in property about, I think it was 2.5 years ago. I mean, with lockdown, who knows what day and time and decade we're in. It just feels like one big kind of lapse. So I've been doing it for a few years now, and I have been purchasing single let, sort of passive in kind of quotation marks there, buy to lets using the BRR method. So I pull out all my money. Since the first deal, of which I put in about £30,000 of my own money, I have not used my own money since then. It's all been investor funds, which has built the portfolio up to currently 1.3 million. Finally, they're all remortgaged, they're all cash flowing, and that portfolio is that chapter is kind of there. At the moment, I'm moving into kind of development, conversions, and I also currently have a flip project going on at the moment, which is, just a kind of normal refurb in a very cute old cottage. I'm also an author. I've got a book on Amazon, The Tej Talks Guide to Property Investing. My second book is, about to be published. And I'm a public speaker and podcaster.
Yeah. So when was it that you realised that social media could be a platform to help you actually raise funding?
I think maybe seeing other people kind of do it or say, oh, hey, I found an investor on social media. I found my business partner on social media. So that was one thing. I think it kind of came naturally in the sense that I thought, okay, well, hold on a minute. I'm posting all this stuff. People are seeing my journey. They're connecting with me. They're seeing the highs, the lows, everything going wrong, everything going right. They've followed me from when I first started out, so they can see that, I had no clue, and I sort of slowly learned and made my way through. Surely this is building trust with people. I was like, okay, yeah, this must be. So, I sort of kept going, and then, kept getting more followers and more listeners. And I thought, well, hold on a minute. I'm getting hundreds, thousands, whatever it was, of listens and views and, followers and stuff from sitting here in my office and, not really going anywhere. But if I go to a networking event, I've got to speak to 20 people and maybe meet 2 for coffee. And then, who knows how many you have to meet before someone invests. And I thought, you know what, this online thing is kind of doing that networking job for me. So I had a kind of slow realization that maybe I should start talking about, that I need money and I'm working with investors, and let's see what happens. And yeah, so it was pretty much organic. And then, I raised money from it. And then I was like, well, okay, this clearly works. Although it was only one time back then, I was like, well, here's my evidence. Here's my case study to prove to myself that this works. And then it kind of snowballed from there.
Yeah. So did you kind of think in your head that you had to have some sort of strategy around this? Was there a specific way that you were posting and were you kind of planning things out, or were you just putting stuff out there?
No, I think, early on, and I would say to an extent, even to this day, I'm just putting content out there that's useful or that kind of helps me, if a builder does something wrong, which is often, if I can go and rant about it on my story, that's kind of like therapy for me, because I can talk to thousands of people who all understand and have experienced what I'm experiencing, and it kind of helps you get through these challenges and problems. So a lot of the time, it's just me sharing my life and my reality. Sometimes, I'll be like, okay, right, I did a beginners week a few weeks ago. I was like, okay, every post this week is going to be about just stuff for beginners, absolute, beginner stuff. I just did some remortgages. I'll post about that. So a lot of it is like, well, what's happening in my life at the moment? And sometimes it's strategic in the sense of, let me post top 3 tips for raising finance. But, there's no real strategy for I want to raise money. Let me, post this up. I think I put subtle hints like, oh, this was investor funded, I have to pay this investor back late because of COVID, or, I drop things like that in, but there's not a, what can I post and say to raise money? Because I think it will just, it'll come across the kind of wrong way. I don't think you need to necessarily be so explicit or obvious about it.
Yeah. And what were the platforms that you've leveraged most, would you say, Tej? Because social media, obviously, for someone listening now who isn't using social media, it could be quite overwhelming because there's just so much choice. So how did you define which platform you were going to use?
Yeah, so I think it was, it's a pure, and, I do this based off, I do a lot of things based off efficiency, right? So am I going to get out more than what I've put in? Is it going to be an efficient use of my time? So, with the platforms, I think naturally I gravitated towards Facebook first because there's a big property community on there, tens of thousands of people across multiple groups. So, it's the place to be, right? Like if you're going to walk into a room full of investors, you're basically going to walk into Facebook. And then I think Facebook just, for whatever reason, I think because you can't schedule posts on it like you can with Instagram, just kind of, I sort of lost my way with it and didn't post as much. I'm still active on it, consuming and commenting and liking, but it just didn't kind of attract me as much. And then I looked at LinkedIn and I just thought, it's a little bit boring. It's a little bit stuffy. I know people, I know you're going to have someone on there who does really, really well with LinkedIn. But for me, my personality, and it just didn't suit me. Instagram was the kind of winner and is the winner because it's just such a good balance. It's very visual, which means, I love writing and I can write. So, but it is very visual, which means you can do a lot with very little. It supports, almost all types of media. Now they've got guides on it. They've got reels. They're kind of. I'm sure they'll do some sort of audio thing. You've got lives. There's just so much in it that isn't on other platforms, and it's so easy to use. And of course, they do it by purpose, right? They want you addicted. They want to push ads your way, and blah blah blah, whatever. So, like for me, Instagram wins out, and like Facebook, Instagram has such a broad range of people who are on it. Like Instagram is, just anyone could be on it. It's not niche. It's not specific to any sector or anything like that. So it kind of opens up your market for, your investor could be a postman. Your investor could be an engineer. Your investor could be anyone, anyone who's alive, within obviously reason. And so Instagram is just the most efficient use of time for me. Even just the direct messaging system as well. It's just so much easier. So, for people starting out, look at efficiency and look at what gives you the most results. Now, if you're doing development and you want a JV with an experienced person, or, you want a kind of serious investor, are you going to be on TikTok dancing around, doing teenager stuff? I mean, you probably could raise money because there's so many rich kids these days, but you're probably not. You're probably going to be on LinkedIn. So I think, choose what's appropriate to you and choose what's efficient as well.
Yeah. And for someone listening right now, Tej, and they don't really know kind of what the process is, could you share a little bit about, how you communicate, how you build that relationship and that trust after that initial point of contact?
Yeah. So I suppose there's kind of two ways here. The first one, which is an easier, it's the harder thing to do, but it's easier in my position and for anyone in my position, is I don't do, so they have this thing where they say you need 7 touch points before you make a sale, or before someone invests in you. I make 5 to 6 of them without actually speaking to anyone, meeting them, knowing their name, knowing how they look, anything. I've done 5 or 6, like off the bat. And then the 6th one comes along and people say, Tej, you've been following you for X amount of time. What's the duration? What's the rate? What's the security? Okay, I'll get back to you. Or, hey, I want to invest. That is the majority of the conversations I have with investors. But I don't want people listening to think it's easy and, people just appear. They can and they do when you have a brand, when you're consistent, when you've been doing it for so long. Of course, people are going to appear. And people, people are going to be sort of interested in what you're doing. And I think that's the kind of way I do it. Now, obviously there's the other way, which is, you meet people, you speak to them, you build trust through showing them case studies, showing them an investor pack, going out to dinner with them. Some people meet each other's families. It's just like building a relationship with anyone in business, I suppose, inviting them to the events you're hosting. But social media really is the easiest way to do that without lifting a finger.
I want to pick up on one of the points you made there, consistency, Tej. And a lot of our listeners now will recognise you from your podcast, Tej Talks. Mm-hmm. And how big a part has that played in raising your profile?
Yeah, so I think it's been huge. What sort of other way could you reach, thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people globally from one location with very, very minimal hardware and software and technology? Like, you can't. So, it's one of these things where, there's no other way I could do that. And it isn't really that hard, to kind of do in terms of the technical setup, et cetera, et cetera. And so for me, it's been absolutely central to kind of everything. So, people listen to it every week, whenever they want, however they want, and they hear my voice every week, mentioning that I use investors, mentioning that I'm doing this deal. And then it all forms part of these, 7 touch points, along with, other social media and YouTube and things like that, that basically means that, like I said before, those 6 touch points are done before they ever speak to me. And audio, I think, is quite a powerful form because, yes, it's not as strong as video because you can see someone, they're moving their hands and their body language, but you really do connect with someone through their voice.
Yeah. And as you say, showing up every week is so important, because I think, there's some people who perhaps will jump on the social media bandwagon and then give up pretty soon because they don't see results. So you have to keep going with this.
I mean, 100%. I mean, I think, when was it? Was it like Christmas time or around then? Everyone seemed to start up a property podcast, have a little fancy launch. Oh, we're doing property podcasts. And then a week, 2 or 3 weeks later, oh, where's everyone gone? Just tumbleweed, like, so it's easy to be like, yeah, I'm going to do it. But then making time for it, being consistent, editing it, getting it up there, doing the right things, it takes a lot of consistency, which a lot of people don't want to do because of the instant generation we live in. They don't see instant results from it. And it is a slow burner because it's not a social media. It's kind of a medium of communication. You can't, like with Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram, you can kind of be social and bring people to you and reach out to them and find them and do ads and all sorts of stuff. Podcasting is pretty sort of dry, in the sense that if I have a podcast, the only way you can find it is maybe by some, keywords and me sort of doing some stuff there. But really, I need to say, hey, Christian, I've got a podcast. Can you listen to it? And I've got to say it to 1,000 people like you. So, it's kind of a complement to another type of social media. And if you're not big on another platform, then it's going to be even harder to get people to the kind of podcast, So it is, it's not the easiest to do as a standalone. I would not recommend it as a standalone, at least not when you start up.
So if you were to kind of look back now, Tej, look at the social media world and how it's impacted you in terms of being able to raise finance, again, just to emphasize for people listening now, the benefits of embracing social media, what would you say?
Sure. So I think one of the biggest things is helping others. Because, like someone listening to this podcast, we're helping them. And then you and I listening to someone else's podcast, they're helping us. And so I think it's about we're all going to get help from people. So let's then put it back into the ether and kind of support each other and kind of continue that community. Secondly, you're going to raise investment finance from it if you're doing it correctly. And if you're doing it ethically and, you're kind of doing it consistently is the kind of biggest thing. Thirdly, it's good fun. Property can be really lonely, especially when you work alone. And we just need to, sometimes just have someone to talk to or kind of rant to or share our experiences with, or, hey, do you know a good builder in this area? And, as much as, social media does have negative sides and, for mental health, it really can. It absolutely connects us, especially in a world of, social distancing and lockdowns.
Yeah. What do you think holds people back, Tej?
I think it's like with anything, it's sort of fear of the unknown. I mean, people say, oh, I'm not really good on video. And, it's a really basic response from me. But, when you were 1 year old, you couldn't talk. When you were 1 year old, you couldn't use a computer. You bloody learned how to. It's the same thing. If you can learn to buy property, if you can learn to do whatever your day job is, why can't you learn to be on video? And then that same sort of fear is, social media, people are going to judge, it's going to take so long. Fear is a big, big blocker that holds people back, and it's irrational. And I think also another sort of thing as well as fear is kind of just like, we live in this instant gratification world where you look at someone's, they're 20 years in business and it's your day 2 and you're like, oh, why am I not there? Why am I not driving what they're driving? Why am I not, raising money like, Tej is in a few hours? Why am I not doing this? And it's like, well, yeah, because it's your day 2 and we're on year 20 here. So people just want things instantly, across the board, all over the world. And then that just leads to people being like, oh, well, Tej says I got a post for 9 months consistently every single day and blah, blah, blah. I don't want to do that. And then, they just don't do it. So, yeah, fear and just not being bothered, I think, are 2 of them.
Yeah. Great words to leave us on there. I think playing the long game is is the word in all respects there. So to be good at anything, you have to be consistent. You have to play the long game. So Tej, I really appreciate you sharing all of that with us today. And if someone wants to connect with you on social media, where should they head to?
So the best place to get me is Instagram. So it's at tej.talks. But, if you type in Tej Talks Property into Google or into your podcast player, something of mine should jump up and appear.
Okay, enjoyed listening to those different points of view there, although definitely some similarities between what Tej and Ellie were saying there, Kevin.
Well, very much so. I think we can pick out some of the common things: consistency, authenticity, although I think somebody thought that was an overused word. I don't think it is. I think if you're genuine, if you're authentic, if people hear your voice, and I think when people hear your voice, they hear the tone, they hear the intention. It's not just sort of sales copy, if you like. They hear who you are. And I think that's really very important to both of them. And they're both excellent communicators, aren't they, in their own way as well. And I just loved the point Ellie made, which was, you're a marketer first and foremost, and then everything else comes after that. What a point. That's a great point.
Yeah. So before we pull out some of the wealth lessons, let's head on over to Trustpilot and pull out one of our latest reviews. And I'm looking at one from Andrew, who has said, I've been with WealthBuilders since I consolidated my various pensions into my company SSAS in 2019. They were helpful getting the paperwork sorted and training completed. And I've since had 2 really good strategy sessions with Paul since then, which have given me confidence I'm on the right track. They've supported me using loan back and stock investments, and I'm now looking to bring some commercial property into the SSAS. All in all, very happy so far.
Wow. Well, that's Paul Brooks, of course, and his team, who were on last week, or at least a few weeks ago, wasn't he, back with us?
That's right.
And, it's just a great thing. It's another form of leverage, Chris, isn't it? Turning old pensions into new, flipping them from where you are to where you want to go. And this was another good point that was made by our guest, wasn't it, really? You've got to tell people where you're going.
Yeah, that's right. And I think very similar to the wealth journey, Kevin, we know things that hold people back, overwhelm, a bit of fear, just lack of knowledge, not understanding things. And that's kind of, what our guest was saying as well, in that social media can be learned. You've just got to start small and then build your confidence from there.
Too right. I mean, I think the case in point, isn't there, here? Both of them saying exactly the same thing, but slightly different applications, different results, different combinations of ways they're embracing it. But none of them really had a clear strategy at the outset. They just made a commitment that it just made more sense, particularly if you think about lockdown, actually. You can't network in a room anyway. And even if you could, if you think about the point that Tej makes, which is you can go into a room, not everybody likes to do that anyway, and network and meet 20 people, or do something online and meet thousands. I mean, crumbs, the opportunity for leverage, you don't have to do an awful lot. We just talked about 100,000 downloads. You don't have to do an awful lot. Just make a regular commitment to do something, one thing. Every 30 days, do one thing. Just decide which one it is for you.
And inside our membership program, we hold masterminds every month, Kevin. We're actually doing one for our members this week, aren't we? Which very much is talking about, how to craft your story to attract investors. And Instagram in particular, which is the platform Tej used, really lends itself towards that because it's very visual. In fact, there is a feature on there called Instagram Stories. But, understanding how to tell a story is going to serve you well if you are looking to build up your reputation online. Yeah,
whether you use Instagram or whether the whole social media thing fills you with dread, it doesn't really matter. In the end, I think, again, another good point Tej made, they both made some great points, actually, is to get people interested, you've got to tell them where you're going, which means tell them a story. So whether you craft the story inside Instagram, first of all, you've got to craft it inside your head. Like everything good happens twice, once in your head, and then secondly, when it comes to taking some action. So craft your story. Certainly the mastermind we'll be doing this Wednesday, I think, for our group is, we call it internally the hero's journey, don't we? Trying to solve the problem of somebody else who becomes the hero. And in this case, Ellie and Tej are trying to solve the problem of investors. So what are their problems? Well, they haven't got enough return on cash. They're frustrated and fed up with the roller coaster ride of the stock market. They're looking for something to do, looking for somebody to trust, but they don't necessarily want to network in rooms. And even if they could, it's not their wealth dynamic. Not everybody wants to work the room, do they? Many people are just quiet and have got great stories to tell, but they don't want to shout it from the rooftops. They'd rather do it very quietly in social media, which is just an easy way to do that. So I think as long as you can be clear on what it is you're trying to get the message across and clear who it is that solution is aimed at, then you're telling a story. And, we just love telling a story, and we love in Wealth Builders being the guide. And that's what Tej and Ellie are trying to be, is a guide to other people, to not just share with them what they are doing, as individuals, but also how, if they work together, they can both achieve something that on their own, neither of them would achieve, So the investor doesn't get a great return unless they get their money working, and the property owner doesn't get more property unless they find more money, because in property, we know, whichever country you're in, buying real estate, buying property is expensive, and everybody runs out of money before they run out of ambition. So you have to find a way to put funding fairly and squarely in your plan. And the best way to do that is to tell people the story of the journey that you're on. And you don't need to be too far ahead of other people, as Tej was mentioning. You don't have to be so well established that it's untrue. You don't have to be some sort of guru. The opposite, because, gurus don't often tell all of the warts and all stories, do they? But both Ellie and Tej both said the same thing, didn't they? That sometimes some of the best posts they do are when they're ranting or when they're saying, hey, this went wrong, because that's what really happens in the world. You try and build your wealth. Things will not go according to plan. They never, ever, ever go according to plan. And that's part of the journey.
Yeah. Just being honest, being vulnerable, and focusing on helping others. And we know in business, you have to create value, you have to be helping others. And I guess it could be easy, Kevin, for someone who wants to raise money to kind of come at it from the other angle and be very much about me, but that's certainly not the right way to approach it.
Well, yeah. And then we'd had a review just recently, didn't we, from Steve, was it, who said, who was exactly in this position. And he said, you've helped me focus on the customer, not me. And so many people in property in particular, because they're focused on the deal, the opportunity, they focus on themselves. They don't focus on the outcome for other people. And, we try and help those people to see that, because we know magic happens when people do connect, collaborate, and do good work. But in the end, Chris, you've got to do good work. There's no point having a great social media presence if you do not deliver. So you have to be willing to build your reputation, not just one post at a time, but also one relationship at a time and one project at a time. You've got to consistently give great value to others. And if you do that, the world will help you. If you don't do that, the world will find you out.
I think that sums things up very nicely, Kevin. So, any further points that you picked up that you think are pertinent to share before we sign off for this week?
Well, I think I like the point of Ellie making the relation to compounding. I get the compound effect of doing something every day. And this is true of wealth. All so often, or too often in wealth, people want to measure the result. They want to measure the result today. It's like being a farmer and you want the crop to be ready a week after you plant it. It doesn't work that way. Wealth doesn't work that way. Relationships don't work that way. Everything takes time. And so you have to delay that gratification of being worried about what happens on this post or that post. You remember also Ellie made a point about, I think in her own unique style, she calls them the lurkers. Those people who kind of follow you from afar, but don't follow you up close. And then something, for whatever reason, the planets align, circumstances conspire, and you get to a place where someone says, hey, I'm ready now. And they reach out. We find this in Wealth Builders too, don't we? We'll have somebody will perhaps hear a podcast, or they'll hear a review or they'll hear something and say, well, now's the time to get in touch. And they get in touch and say, hey, I've been following your podcast for this period of time, or I've been following you, Kevin, for this period of time, or whatever they're saying. But what we know is the consistency of doing many things well, but binding that to the authenticity and the integrity, unimpeachable integrity, really, of doing the right thing in every situation, never shortcutting anyone. The only shortcuts we want are intellectual ones to help people learn lessons. So I hope there were some great lessons from Ellie and Tej. I certainly learned a lot. I'm not saying I'm an expert on any of these things. You know, we use LinkedIn, we use the podcast, we're using Clubhouse. I don't think we're experts in Instagram, that's for sure. And it's interesting that he taught me a lesson or two. So I think that's just being humble, isn't it? Listening to what other people do and decide whether you want to apply it or whether you just want to acknowledge that they're good at what they do and let them get on with it.
So we hope you found that interesting and insightful today, picks up some tips to help you along your journey. And of course, today is just one small piece of the overall wealth building journey from A to B. And if you'd like to see the entire roadmap from start to finish, then don't forget to join us on that webinar on the 3rd of June. And you can head to wealthbuilders.co.uk/academy launch and register your place now. So thank you for listening today. Thank you, Kevin. And we'll catch up on Wealth Talk, same time, same place next week.
Until then, my friend, see ya.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Don't forget that we are constantly updating our resources inside the Wealth Builders membership site to help you create, build and protect your wealth. Head over to wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership right now for free access. That's wealthbuilders.co.uk/membership.